Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Productivity Mastery. Actually, episode 66 right now. And I have a pleasure and honor to be joined today by Christian Schraft, who's, and I want to give the credit to a common good friend who introduced us, Marian Temelko from Dynamics Group. Thank you, Marian, for the kind introduction. Christian was a guest at the leaders who care, a true leader who cares, but today we'll be speaking about something else. We'll talk about productivity and namely, how do you lead with purpose, but also embed discipline in order to produce results? And before we get into this conversation, I would like to give you the word, Christian, to introduce yourself and share more about yourself, about your background, and what do you do today?
Very good, Stoyan. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Stoyan. So my name is Christian Schraft. I've been running businesses for many, many years. So I would think of myself as a fairly experienced CEO and leader. By training, I'm a physicist, but it's been a long time since I really did technical work. I've worked for a German lamp manufacturer, Osram, for almost 20 years, mostly as a business unit CEO in various locations. I've then been running another lighting business, Sylvania, for a few years. And I'm now at a smaller lighting company, lamp company, where our name is LightTech in Europe, Light Sources in the US and Asia. But it's not a name many of you will be familiar with because we're a pure OEM play. In other words, we make specialty lamps for equipment makers, and typically we make them under the brand of the equipment maker, so we don't have a brand of our own. And the lamps that we make are very special in the sense that it's not visible light, what you would want in your home or your office. It's UV lamp, ultraviolet light that we generate, and that has a number of purposes. The main one, the biggest market that we serve is the germicidal market. These are so-called UVC sources, lamps, and this UVC radiation inactivates viruses, bacteria, germs, and so forth. So we're kind of at the forefront of fighting against coronaviruses because these sources of radiation will inactivate them. So I'm in the fortunate position that the demand is strong beyond belief, and it's actually a fight to not be able to serve the demand just because of capacity limitations. In a sense, we benefit from the COVID-19 situation, but even before that, you would have. Our products have gone into markets like water treatment, wastewater treatment, drinking water treatment, air purification, surface purification, and these kind of applications. So it's speaking about purpose. It's not too difficult because we do something that is very obviously good for the world, and that makes a discussion about purpose a little easier. But it's possible everywhere. So that's me in a nutshell. Maybe I also could mention that I've had a very international career. I've studied, worked in, I think, 5 different countries, speak 4 languages, and I've traveled a lot in my life, and also family background is fairly international. So I've always enjoyed working in an international context with different cultures, different people. And so I've always tried to understand what drives people, how I can motivate different types of characters and personalities. And that's probably something that has helped me in my career. As I mentioned, I've been in leadership positions for many, many years. And I think what has been driving me is very much working with different kinds of people. So it's not necessarily the product, the P&L. It's really about making a difference by working with different kinds of people.
Thank you, Christian, for this introduction and for actually leading a company that's making a difference and leading with purpose. And talking about purpose, for many of the leaders who are listening to this podcast, maybe if you can give some overview and some points here on why should we be clear as an organization what is the purpose and why this whole idea of understanding what's the why and having the whole team to buy into it, why is that important?
I think there are two reasons for that. One is quite simple. The purpose defines the objectives, and therefore people know what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go. And that's important, of course, so everybody is going the right direction, the same direction. The other thing is, I think it's a human need and desire to do something that we can be proud of. Think about a private situation, Saturday evening, you go to some event or something, you meet people, and it just feels better if you have a story to tell about why what you do makes a difference. Now, the good thing is it can be very, very different for different people. So I will never forget my first job interview with a lamp company, and I had done lighting stuff at university and research. So I was I liked this thing, and I was well prepared for the interview with the CEO of the company. And so I explained to him why I thought lamps were great. They don't kill anybody. Everybody needs them. They are everywhere, and it's just so useful. And I was kind of passionate about this. And again, it was an interview. I wasn't even there. And then this guy looks at me and says, "Oh, well, yes, somehow you're right." He wasn't quite as convinced as I was. I learned later that at the time he was actually interviewing with an automotive car manufacturer. So he probably thought a big brand in cars was sexier than incandescent light bulbs. But no, so it's different. And for everybody, it's something else. So it's not that, there's one purpose that's good and others are bad. Everybody has to find out for himself or herself what makes sense as a purpose in life. And but it's important you ask yourself that question, and it's also important that and that's where I get passionate, as you can say. Once you found that, then it's very important that you also tell people about it, motivate people with it, show people that you believe in what you're doing. There's a quote from the ancient philosopher Augustinus: "You can only ignite a fire if you're burning yourself." So you cannot really take people somewhere if you're not burning yourself, if you're not passionate about what you're doing. So that's why purpose is important, because it gives you direction, but it also gives you passion and something to be proud of.
I really love this topic, and the fact that when we were discussing what should be the topic of the episode, we ended up with purpose and discipline. And we recently published our first book with my co-author, which is called Perform, the Unsexy Truth About Startup Success. And actually Perform is an acronym with the different areas. And the first P stands for purpose and values. And how many workshops and trainings we've done, we always so excited to see how this fire lights when actually founders or big organizations connect to this purpose, figure out what this purpose is. And I just want to give an example that is from my personal experience. This is my accountant. I was looking for an accountant a few years ago, and somebody said, "You got to talk to this guy." I'm like, okay. He looked legit. He has recommendation. I go to his webpage, and the first thing it says there is, "I help small business owners to sleep better at night." And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I'm a small business owner, meet the guy. He's fully driven. He's not an accountant. He's using accounting as a vehicle because he himself was a small business owner. And he wants to support his people. And there were situations that this guy will show up, like do things that are out of his job position, because he wants to help me as a founder, as his client, to sleep better at night. He's fully aligned with the why, and he's in the book. We're talking about it. It's exciting. It's inspiring when you know what's the why behind. So I think it's I'm really happy we're diving into this kind of topic. And purpose is one, right? Figuring out what's the why. But the second part of the question is how do we get people to buy into this purpose? which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important that you burn yourself, as we said. So that's very important. Obviously, you have to be a good communicator, and you have the ability, whatever the purpose, to bring across why it makes sense. And again, it could be very different things. So it's important. It's a necessary condition to lead a business. But it's not necessarily sufficient to just have the purpose. That's why we have this other topic of discipline. And this is where different characters come in. And this is where you need to understand the kind of people that you have. So I met one or two people, maybe three people in my life who were self-starters in the true sense of the word, and very driven, and they would get on a task, get on a job, and they would just not stop short of completing the task. I have one person whom I've met a few times, and when she is in working mode, she gets so deeply involved that she every day, I'm being told, she sets the alarm clock at 11 p.m. in order not to forget to go to bed. So when you recruit people and you can get this character, this type of personality, and you can afford it, then that's a good idea, because that will solve a lot of problems. Now, the reality, unfortunately, the reality is that most of us are not that kind. In other words, it needs some structure or some discipline in order for normal human beings to get a task accomplished. And I thought this was very, very visible during the lockdown. So I was in a situation where I had to work from home for maybe 6 weeks last year. And I would say I personally don't like home office, but that's a personal preference. But I feel I need to work in a different way when I'm at home. So when I'm at the facility, when I'm with the team here, a lot of things are going on. You go around, you talk to people, you get ideas, you see things and everything. When you're at home, all this doesn't happen. So what I need to do is actually I plan my day in pretty much detail. So I'll set an hour apart for a certain task, not more, because I want to be finished at the end. Depends on the task, of course. But so I need a structure, and I set up meetings with people that also gives me structure. So I know, okay, 10 o'clock, I'll speak to this guy. I actually need to prepare this conversation. So I need to do this and that. And then it works. But an unstructured day, I tend to waste time. So I need to, when at home, and at a facility, at a factory, in an office, it's less the case. It's also helpful to structure your day, but because automatically you have context, it makes it easier to get things done. At home, I need that structure, very rigid, and that's discipline. So even with a purpose, under certain circumstances, that is not enough, and you need to give yourself structure.
I couldn't agree anymore that discipline is so important for creativity to blossom and for productivity to happen. And since we started talking about your self-management, your time management as an executive, but also in your personal life, I just want to stay there for a second. Do you have any specific principles? For example, do you schedule in the morning the most important thing and you kind of make it a do not disturb time? Like, how do you make sure that you actually focus on the most important things for you as a leader before all the distractions are taking place?
Yeah. I think I probably do something that many people do. I have like my task lists somewhere on my laptop and in Outlook and things like that. But in the morning, I will look around, look at what's in my task list, and then on a sheet of paper, I will write down what I want to do today and what I want to achieve. It's always handwritten on one sheet of paper, and it's important that at the end of the day, everything on that sheet of paper is crossed out. I literally do it like that. So I have these things here, and so I cross things out, and I will typically also have a little schedule on that sheet of paper, like what comes first, what comes second. But it's a very important exercise for me to take a pen and put it on a sheet of paper, and I do that for the business side, for professional, but I also do it for private tasks that I may have on that day. So it all goes on one. It's an A5 format, one sheet of paper, and then it's important I get it all crossed out across the day. And then once it's on paper, it gives me kind of peace of mind. I won't forget it. I even if it's an uncomfortable task, because it's on a sheet of paper, I know I'll get behind it. I'll get it done, even if it's something I don't like to do. It helps me with the discipline.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Often we get this question, Toya, what is the best tool? What's the best app and software to manage my time? And I had recently Jay Papasan, who's the author of The One Thing, an exceptional business executive and an author. We hosted David Allen on The Leaders Who Care, who's another exceptional guy in productivity. And these guys are also planning on paper. And they have this one piece of paper. And I see this tendency in some of the most exceptional and some of the most productive people in the world to keep it simple. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't have to be on paper. Some people love digital, but what is something that's simple for you? It's in front of you. It will help you to stay focused on these few things that matter most. Mm-hmm. But before figuring out these few things, you need to put them down on paper and you need to do some analysis and say, which of those things, what is the one thing? What is the second thing? What is the third thing? How do I make sure that I get them done despite all the distractions that are coming during the day?
Yeah. It's interesting because some people have these little notebooks where they make their notes and everything. Of course, I take notes as well in a conversation and I keep them somewhere. But this little sheet I do every morning never survives the day. I don't know why, but it would always, so I could have a stack of them and know what I did 5 years ago or something, and I don't do that. I just don't keep them. It's kind of a way of kind of, it probably gives me that feeling that I'll have to do it today, and then the task has to be accomplished, and then it's over, and I don't need that little sheet anymore. So I don't know how much psychology there is, or maybe it's just a habit, I guess. And but yeah, that's the way how I do that. And sometimes, of course, I don't always achieve everything in a day. And then if there's still something left on that sheet, that goes then back into my Outlook system as a task with a date. And that's electronically, it's safe and doesn't go away. So there is a way of bringing it back into the electronic system. But that sheet of paper is always there. And I know there are people who are making jokes about my little sheets. That's fine.
Yeah, I can imagine. You mentioned this 1 hour blocks, like you schedule an hour to get something done specifically. Maybe we can dig into the other topic as well about effectiveness and efficiency. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, when you set these tasks, is that like a do not disturb time? Like this hour, your team cannot reach you. This is very important and you need to be fully focused, or you're more kind of open for whatever happens?
Yeah, there are tasks for which I do close the door and it's do not disturb. It's a minor portion of my work. And that's obviously related to the CEO role. So I'm not the thinker or not the accountant working on some numbers, but I need to work with people and get ideas from people, give instructions to people, and all these things. So I would say that probably 70 or 80% of my day is working with people. I like to schedule that in general. So people will typically have a meeting in the diary when I want to sit with them. So everybody can get prepared. I avoid big meetings with 5 or 10 people. So good meetings for me are like 3 people, 4 people, maybe 5 people who are relevant for the topic and who have something to contribute, and not having a dozen people in a room and the majority of them have not much to say or are not really are not really important for that purpose. So big corporate style meetings is something that I don't buy. I don't think that's the right way. So it's more like smaller meetings with people who have something to say. So that's one piece, and that's scheduled and that has a structure because that helps everybody be prepared, including myself. But then there's the unstructured piece, which is powerful as well because it gives you ideas or insights that you weren't expecting. So just walking around the shop floor is sometimes just interesting and important, not only to be seen, but also to see and to maybe have an idea, we could do this entirely differently. And that's not scheduled. That's the spark. That's the inspiration that has to come. So that's an element. So I would say in my day, it's probably maybe 20% really working on a task, door closed, do not disturb. And then 20% is unstructured, talking to people, walking around, and the remainder are typically meetings or scheduled phone calls, video conferences, and so forth. There's not much travel right now for obvious reasons. But even then, and I think that's very interesting with COVID-19, of course, that our travel habits will definitely change. And when I think of the old days, how much time we spent flying somewhere, being somewhere, jet lagged and everything, and you realize, yes, sometimes you have to meet people in person, but for many tasks to be accomplished, you can do that remotely. So I have two main locations, one in the US and one in Hungary. And yes, I think it would be helpful to be in the US a bit more often. I haven't been there for a while because it's not possible. But a lot of things like daily work can actually be done remotely if you have the right structure.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I definitely miss travel a lot, but I can also see there's many things that we can do without having to meet and to travel. So that's something we need to reflect on and see how can we navigate the future when hopefully everything goes back to previous levels in terms of this pandemic is over, and how do we actually start working in the most effective way. And talk about effectiveness. I love the piece about having this spontaneous time. Like you can't plan everything. Like if you over plan, then you become too rigid. So maybe if you can share a little bit about that, because as you said, you have clear objectives, and when you set clear objectives, somehow it comes naturally also to leave some space for spontaneity for you. Sounds like. So could you maybe talk about the effectiveness and efficiency, and what's the difference between those two?
Right. So for me, efficiency is about achieving a certain objective with a minimum of resources, time, money, and so forth. I think that's the traditional definition, by the way. So I think that's the normal way of running a business. Purpose, strategy, objectives, and I have these objectives. I want to make 100 products of whatever type, and then I try to do that with minimum of material, minimum of labor, and just being efficient in how I make these products. Same for management tasks, achieve certain goals with a minimum of time invested and get the objective. Effectiveness is different in that here it's all about getting a certain result done, no matter what I have to invest or what I have to input. So there may be just objectives in my business or my private life that I want to achieve at any cost. So efficiency now isn't relevant anymore. It's really about getting this done. This might be, it's almost, of course, you always have to ask the question, is reaching this objective really worth investing anything? Any amount of time and money? That's probably never the case, but there are just things that are so important that you will not necessarily look at the efficiency in that, but you want to achieve that. If I wanted, say, if I wanted certain getting into a certain customer, big potential, and then getting the foot into the door and starting business with that customer might be something that I just want to achieve. Of course, I need to make sure the business will be profitable and all that. So, but then this may require a significant investment just to conquer that customer, and that's what I would refer to as effectiveness. Then there's another point that I've come across a few times in my life, and that's that holds both for effectiveness and efficiency, about yourself as a leader and as a person, and with your own personal strengths and weaknesses. I've been working with a great entrepreneur who said the following: whenever I have an important task that I want to achieve, I ask myself, am I the best person to accomplish this task? Or is somebody else maybe better? In general, I realize I'm actually not the best person to achieve that objective. And then there is this person who might be actually better. And then I get help. Then I get help from that person, from in whatever format. So ask for help, get support. That will make you more effective in achieving goals, because you're probably not the best at everything. And therefore, ask yourself who is the best at a certain task, and then get help. And don't be ashamed of it. It's a strength and not a weakness to understand where you have weaknesses and then get help.
I love it. Starting with self-awareness about your strengths and really taking time to get to know yourself, not just what you're good at, but actually what you love to do. And be able to surround yourself with people that you can delegate all the rest, and that's what creates a good team.
Yeah, that is very important, and that's again about understanding people, understanding the needs of people, which is important for building a good team, but which is also very important to manage the team properly in order to gain maximum efficiencies. So as I mentioned, there's different types. There are the self-starters, that people who basically need objectives, but they don't need very tight management or discipline, because but it's interesting. These people are often very much, or they've learned in their lives that they need to solve problems themselves, and that can involve getting help from others, but organizing things in a way that the task can be accomplished. They have learned that it's best if they do it themselves. And that's fine. It's fine to get help, but organizing the whole thing, they do it by themselves. And so these people, they need space. They don't need tight management. They need space. Maybe they need resources in order to get there, be it money or support or whatever, but let them organize things themselves. And then obviously there are other people who need a lot more monitoring, a lot more, has this been done? Has that been done? So there again, and that's how we started, just purpose and objectives doesn't mean something gets done with a certain category of people. So these people need structure. And then I'm also a big friend of numbers and monitoring things. There is a saying that I once heard that I like a lot. Only what gets measured gets done. It's logical. It's logical. But yes, if you look at the financials, yes, you need objectives in terms of revenue, in terms of bottom line, and so forth. If you run a facility, a factory, shrinkage or scrap is very important, so you don't throw away something that could have been of value. And these are all things that you can measure on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, whatever. You shouldn't overdo it. I used to work for a company. They had about 100 daily reports, and then we were asking, do we need them all? And actually, there was a person for every report that was saying, yes, I need this one. I work with it. It was a big organization, so yeah, but you shouldn't overdo it. But very clearly, if you don't measure things, then things don't get done. and it's human. It's not a criticism. It's just a fact. So you need to have ways of measuring performance and progress in your organization. That's part of discipline again.
You're just reading my thoughts, Christian, because I wanted to go into this topic of measuring, but you're ahead of me, I can see. But what I wanted to also kind of explore with you is like your personally, you in your line of business, how do you, like, how often do you plan and set the goals? Like, if you can give us maybe some more like nitty gritty advice from your personal experience, like, do you have any specific system or methodology that you'd recommend in terms of setting goals? How many goals? Like, how often do we check them, just for the audience to maybe get inspiration on a very operational kind of level?
Yeah, it's probably a pretty boring or pretty common way of doing this. So there's nothing special. With my key people, I get together basically at the beginning of a calendar year, January, which is also the financial year for us, and I have my own high-level objectives for the company, and then I'll break them down for the individual managers, line managers, and that could be anything from like salespeople will have a sales target, they will have a margin target or a price target, and then some special objectives. Production leaders will have output targets, scrap targets, and so that's being done in January. There is a little bit of money attached to that, so performance is being rewarded with bonus, again, something pretty common. And then we review this on a quarterly basis. So we've just done Q1, and so looking at performance here, and I think what's important, that's measuring, but also what's important that I use these appraisals or reviews in order to understand what's missing in the business. So I'm expecting not just myself telling them, oh, this went well, this maybe could be improved. I'm also asking very actively, what are your ideas to improve the situation? What can we do better? What do we need to change? So this becomes more of a almost informal discussion, and I don't want to be too formal with the objectives. It's more, brainstorming is maybe too far on the other side, but it's really a format where I want to understand what I can do to help this person perform better. So does he need more resources? Does he need a better understanding of the objectives? Does he need whatever, a new software, whatever? So, hearing from people how we can close any gap that may be there in terms of performance, and that's a format that I like. So it goes a bit beyond the normal kind of appraisal or review, which I think I'm using it, but it's a very conservative format. I know there are people who talk about apps and daily feedback and to manage performance. That's not something I do. So it's still a bit of a formal review, but then as we're in it, it's quite informal, and it's both ways. I think that's the key point. It's not just me judging and giving feedback, but it's really both ways that I try to make it in a way that I'm with that person, thinking about what can we do to improve the business and to perform better overall. So it doesn't become just a one-way appraisal.
Thank you for bringing this up, because I don't want people to live with the impression that it's all about measuring and managing and pushing people to achieve deadlines. It's a combination. It's a balance of being the leader, being open for feedback, understanding what people need in order to perform, at the same time having clear objectives, clear results that you're after, and not creating a too soft of a culture, right? Which is the
It's a very, very good point. And as you form and create a management team, there again you need to understand what type of characters will complement yourself. So if you're more let me say what we had, the purpose person, the visionary person, the communication person, and you have factories to run, then potentially it's a good idea to have a plant manager who is good at kicking asses, I had a very good one, and he, in his younger days, he was very active as in contact sports. This guy loves contact sports. And so when he goes down to the shop floor, this person is not afraid of anything. And he's I know these guys hate me, but that's fine. As long as they respect me, they don't need to love me. And that's, let me say, that's a factory environment where people, to put it mildly, need some guidance or need some pressure to get to work. So you need to balance that. And it's actually quite interesting, takes us a little bit elsewhere, is again knowing about how people work as a personality. There are people who just need pressure. In order to, they don't come to work because they love it. They come to work because they need the money. And if you don't watch them, they will probably just do nothing. And therefore you need that tightly knit structure. And obviously factory is typically a little bit like that. And then things go well. And then other people, they have difficulties handling pressure. They operate a lot better if they feel safe and secure in the environment, and under pressure they get paralyzed. I sometimes compare that to a situation and that's many years ago when I was a student. There was an incident where an old lady fell down the staircase at the train station, and nothing dramatic, but I could then observe people reacting very differently. There were people who were immediately jumping there to help and were very, very quick and very dynamic and trying to help and do something, and others were just standing paralyzed. And and I can see that even at some stage. We had an incident in one of the facilities I was in charge of, and you see the same behavior. They're a crisis manager, so very, very good at under these crisis situations to act, and then you get others who get paralyzed. So you need to understand what kind of people you're working with, and need obviously to put the right people into the right job. So probably for a factory, for a plant manager, you need somebody who can act under pressure and who can react if something happens, and can be organized even under in a crisis. And I guess military is the same thing. You need people who can act and react under pressure, under difficult situations, and that's kind of how you have to select leaders. Maybe for a salesperson, you don't need that kind of. Maybe this is something else that you then need. So understanding characters and how they would react under certain situations is an important thing for to run any kind of business.
It is such an important point that putting the right people at the right positions. And I remember recently listened to a podcast with John Maxwell, the leadership guy, and he shared a story from his young years when he was a player in a basketball team. And he said every year at the beginning of the season, our coach will play the first team against the second team. Only the first team, he will mix up the positions of the players. And cool. the second team will always beat the first team.
It's fantastic, isn't it? That's very insightful. Very, very interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good example. Yeah.
It really makes you think, right? It really makes you think, am I putting Sally at the right role? She's maybe an exceptional performer, but it's my ownership as a leader to find the position that she will perform at her best.
Yeah. And I mean, this is really one of the core elements of leadership in any situation. A leader can only be successful through the people that he leads. And he can only be successful if he knows where to put whom. So yeah, that's I like this example. It's really good because it's really easy to understand and just how important it is to have everybody perform. So job rotation is important, but it has also its limitations.
For sure. And you mentioned pressure, and actually I'm gonna quote you, if I may. You said sometimes pressure is a very good tool. And if I can kind of ask you personally, how do you navigate the stress, and like you look like a very calm guy, and like everything is in place and you're under control. But like, what do you do when things are really stressful? You may be overwhelmed. Some things happen that you didn't expect. How do you get yourself into this productive place?
Interesting question. Yes. As one thing, so it depends on obviously on the situation or an incident or whatever happens. But there is several things that I apply, and they're all related in the sense that it's all about taking a step back and trying to understand what's happening. So just when something happens, and it's a little bit like my little paper in the morning, just sit back and think. What is actually happening? Yeah, even making notes can be very helpful in that situation. So and it could be seconds, it could be minutes, depending on the situation, but don't react immediately, but think and maybe write it down. Then if I have, and I do this quite often, when I need some insights or some new ideas, or also get some relief because there's a lot of pressure, I walk. I just walk. And this could be 10 minutes, this could be 2 hours. I've done this, that's 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, but I remember that I had a bit of a crisis and a lot of pressure. I was based in Hong Kong at the time, and I didn't know what to do. And I then took like 3-hour walk up to the peak. I was all wet with sweat at the end. And then I had a brilliant idea. And I had a solution. It just came, and when I walk, and when there's something's keeping me busy up there, then I walk and I speak with myself. It's actually almost like speaking, or I imagine I speak to someone else, and just by having this imaginary conversation with either myself or somebody else, that is enough for me to generate ideas or to see things from a different perspective. So that is a very, very good tool for me. Now, there's one other tool, different, but again, related. I do meditation, not every day, but several times per week, which helps me to just stay calm, keep things at a distance. And so there's also an element of hypnosis that I'm doing. It works for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but it's something where you just get into a very quiet, very calm down inner state, almost like floating. And that gives me confidence, that gives me that calmness. I was a bit surprised when you said I come across very calm, because sometimes people say, I'm actually quite passionate, and I use my hands when I speak, and so I can be quite expressive when I do that. But I think I know what you mean. So yes, there's a way for me, and despite all the daily fights, all the pressure and everything, to take that step back, and look at the situation a little bit from outside. I might be the center of all of it, but I have the ability to take a step back and look at it if I was an outside person.
Yeah, and when I mean calm, I actually probably mean present. And I do think you can be calm and passionate at the same time when you have this kind of a sense of presence. And for those of you listening, I think this is such an important point that Christian made. It's about creating this space between you and the situation, so you can see it and observe it and actually be more objective about whatever situation it is. And I love the fact that the tools that you shared reminds me about the book of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I think sometime by the end of the book, he talks about how at some point every evening he'll have meetings with his favorite leaders and role models. Only there was never a meeting. It was in his head. He would close his eyes and just imagine, Benjamin Franklin and like all the leaders, and he would have meetings and just whatever worries and concerns he had, he would say, Benjamin, what would you do on my situation?
It's brilliant. I haven't heard about this. I'll have to find out more, because I think that's pretty brilliant. Get yourself into a conversation with somebody else who might have an idea, and automatically that will spark ideas with yourself. So that's very interesting. I like that. I'll use that when I speak to someone. I'll actually have somebody like that. Somebody who may have had similar situations, and that's brilliant.
That's really cool. Like, you make your own advisory board.
Yeah.
I can get anybody. I can get anybody.
Characters to be there. Yeah. Cool.
I love it. Christian, we have a question coming from LinkedIn, and I would like to ask this question to you. So the question is, what are the identifiers making each employee potentially a leader? What are the barriers to figure out his or her certain leadership field? How would you support the people to formulate their voice on that?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I had a long conversation a few months back with a young person in the business who was trying to figure out for himself whether he wanted to be a leader or rather an individual contributor. So I was thinking about, how can you know if either yourself or about somebody else, are you CEO material? I realized there is two or three. Let's develop this. Number one, you have to have a vision of not the world, but the vision of the where you want to take a business. So if you have no idea where you want to go, and that's basically purpose, mission, whatever name you want to use or word you want to use, you have to have the power to imagine a different future than what it is today. So where do you want to go? How do you want to shape your market or your business or your life and other circumstances? So you have to have that imagination of where you want to go. If you don't have that, difficult. And then the second one is willpower, sheer willpower. If you have a vision, but you don't have the determination to go there, to fight for it, then your vision is not worth anything. So willpower, sheer willpower. And it could be perceived as negative in some instances. You have to have the ability, and that goes with willpower, to bite. When you want to be the CEO, maybe there's another guy who wants to be the CEO. Or another girl or whatever, you have then to have the willpower, but I want to get there. I want this. So it's about imagining a new future, but then also to have the ability to get there by sheer willpower. In an ideal world, that would be something positive by having the strength to make something happen against resistance, against the odds. On a personal note, I think I'm okay there, but it's not my biggest strength to have this willpower. And I had two leaders in my career and they were both from different countries outside of my home country, but they used the same English word to tell me what's missing. And they said, "Christian, you're not ruthless enough." Now, I'm not saying, and I've had a career, and although these guys were telling me I'm not ruthless enough, but yes, it's at least a question to discuss: how ruthless do you need to be, or do you want to be, in order to be a leader? So it's a mix between something very positive, like speaking about a vision, about how to make the world a better place, and then when it comes to implementation, you have to have willpower, and depending on the situation, maybe ruthlessness as well. So I find it very interesting to see how in this pandemic times, different governments act differently. And you could very much link ruthlessness and vaccination rates. So look at the UK, look at the US, look at Hungary. People had their shots, they had their jabs. Look at other European countries. Most of them, actually, it's a lot slower. And I would say you could find many elements of ruthlessness and how these countries got where they are. And you could say it was actually good for the countries. And they can open up a lot faster and everything, but they were thinking more of themselves than of others. So it's a mix here. So, and I mean, I've quoted this before. Ruthlessness comes in difficult crisis situations, like a pandemic or like a war. So, in a war, you need to apply different leadership principles than in, let me say, a software company or whatever, or hospitality and so forth. So then in a war, purpose might just not be enough, because most people would think the purpose is to get out of this alive, and not necessarily conquering that next hill. So that's where discipline comes in again in a very different way. So that's where leadership is, and let's be non-judgmental, but sometimes applying discipline in a ruthless way is just needed to get to certain results. And that is also something that you need to see in a future leader or in yourself, if that's what you want to go for. Do you have enough of that ability to get things done, willpower, and depending on the job, a certain amount of ruthlessness?
I love it, and I couldn't agree anymore. It's, you need to have this also trait of character, which is like when, for the lack of a better word, shit hits the fan. The leader needs to take the tough decisions. I watched this movie recently. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it's even not in the movie. It's a story where it's about Winston Churchill, and it was this exact part from the Second World War where he's sacrificing, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 people, like having these 3,000 or 4,000 people at 100% dead. They're not sending them any savings, anything, in order to have a chance to save these, I think, 300,000 soldiers. But he needs to take the tough decision, and he had a lot of people from the government saying, "Oh my God, how could you leave people to die?" But he's ruthless. He's like, "Look, I would rather save 300,000 people, or at least have a chance." And it's really tough. It's really tough. How do you take such a decision, right?
It brings me, it's a very good comment, and it brings me to another important skill or element of a personality that you need to have as a leader: the ability to decide or to take a decision when there's a lot of uncertainty, a lack of clarity. Taking a decision when you know everything is easy. Everybody can do it. And it's not, I would say it's not even a decision then, it's just you do the obvious. However, and probably Churchill in that example, he actually didn't know whether it would work. So he just had to take a bet and do something. So if you're uncomfortable taking decisions when you don't really know what the right thing is, then it's very difficult, and you'll be permanently stressed because you feel you need to decide something, but you don't have enough information to know which is the right decision. If that stresses you, you will always be stressed as a leader, because you constantly have to take decisions where you don't have all the elements available to you.
That is another super relevant point. Feeling comfortable in uncertainty and actually being the driving force, navigating uncertainty and showing people that you're leading this vision, this place where we're going to, even though sometimes it's just pure hope. We're going to get there, but painting this picture and this vision and driving everybody on the boat to buy into this vision is such a great quality for a leader. And talking about, again, leadership, I want to bring you into we have a lot of listeners who are in their 20s as well. And I don't know if you've seen this kind of tendency and trend, but I can see many young people being lost in some way, specifically about what's my purpose, what should I do, how do I find my dream job, like what is this big why I should contribute to the world with. And if I can bring you back, and like with this knowledge and maturity you have right now, if you're right now at your 20s and trying to figure out how to find your purpose. Like, what would be your advice to young leaders, ambitious leaders, who how to find their purpose, or how to what should be the next step for them?
I think it's a challenge, definitely. I mean, you probably know what you're good at, what you like doing, but at the end, to really understand what suits you, you have to try things out. I'll give you a very personal example here. When I was a student, and even in my high school years, I had kind of that. I wanted to be a professor at university. That had a very positive image for me, and I thought, yeah, university is a great thing and all that. And then when I took towards the end of my degree studies, my master's science in physics, I worked in the lab for a year, and I realized I'm not made for research. I found it terribly boring. I don't think I was good at it. I realized I'm not necessarily a person who wants to go very, very deep in one subject matter, rather someone who wants to be broad, know many things, and very curious, but I don't necessarily go very deep, I go broad. So professor is just about the opposite of that. So that wouldn't have been a good career path for me. And I only found that out by doing that, by doing kind of the typical work that a professor would have to do. And I would have had to do research in a lab for many years to even get to that level. And I decided or found out that's not me. That's not good for me. So that's a personal example, and there's probably 100 others. And so sometimes it's just about doing away with things that you think are cool by trying them out. and if it works, great, then you found something. But if it doesn't work, then you know, okay, that's a dream, but it's not going to be reality because it's not for me. I still have a lot of respect for professors, but I'm not going to be one. So so try things out. Don't. That's probably the one thing I would say about myself. I should probably have tried out even more things, both professionally and privately, to get more insights about myself. So I think hanging around on the couch at home, not doing anything, versus trying things out, the latter is always the better.
It's still, you have a lot of years ahead to try things out, Christian. So I'm sure you get into even better. But I think it's such a great point, and it reminds me. There was a book, I think, by Barbara Moore, if I'm not confused about the author name, where she talks about divers and scanners. Divers are the people that you described that just love to go deep in one specific thing, and scanners, just like you described yourself and myself, we like to be more of a involved in many different things.
Yeah.
And but you wouldn't know if you don't try out things. And I think if I can go back to my early 20s, I think I was overthinking things so much. Young people, they try to find what is the dream job? Oh my God, what if it's not the dream job? What if it's not the perfect? Well, what if it's not? It's like, what's the best next step? I think looking for the dream job is probably not a good objective. Maybe it's about, what am I curious about? What do I want to try out next? Mm-hmm. And instead of thinking for 6 months, you might want to jump on it and just in a month, if you don't like it, leave and just try something else, right? So this is a great advice, Christian. Thank you so much for that. So,
also, in general, there's another element about when you think about what you'd like to do. How much security do you need in your own life? How much stability do you need in your own life? I have a lot of respect for people like yourself, Stoyan, starting an own business, working freelance, independent, and I have a few people I know very well who are like that, and I have a lot of respect for these people, mainly because I'm not like that. I don't think I would be a good startup person, mainly because I would feel that this level of uncertainty. Is it going to work? Are people going to buy my stuff? This creates uncertainty, and it's, again, non-judgmental. It's not good or bad. It's just who you are, and that would then also help you determine where to go. Is it a career like Stoyan, or more want to be a civil servant, public service, job security? You need a new place to live every 2 or 3 years, because then it's boring, or you want to build your house in which you'll live for the rest of your life. This kind of needs that you may or may not have should also be taken into account.
First of all, Christian, thank you so much. These words coming from you means a lot to me. So thank you for the kind words. But I also it's such a great point about the fact that for some people working as an executive or as a manager or even as a practitioner, it's amazing. I think we kind of put the pendulum a little bit to the side of everybody needs to be an entrepreneur, and that's not true. You can be an exceptional freelancer, or maybe a great person to work in a company as a designer. There's no right and wrong. It's about trying out and finding out who you are, where do you feel comfortable, and actually happy.
It's a perfectly non-judgmental. Everything is fine, but you need to know who you are and what your needs are, and you need to take that into account. So that was the professor thing. That was now the entrepreneurial thing. What makes you happy? What makes you get out of bed in the morning? Find it out for yourself, and that's very important. And then everything else is fine.
And this is a perfect way to wrap up this discussion, Christian. It's been such a pleasure having you around and sharing all the ton of advice on productivity, on finding your purpose, on leadership. And just so we can wrap it up properly, are there any kind of final words you would like to share to the audience? And having in mind now it's been close to 14 months of this global pandemic, people working from home, there's a lot of uncertainty. So what would be your final message, final words to the people?
It's depending on your role, but it's one thing that's always important. You need to strike the right balance. So what I was trying to say between purpose and discipline is it's not contradictory at all. It's actually all about the balance of the two, and different situations will require different ways of balancing that. But it is leadership in many ways is about bringing things together that may appear contradictory at the beginning, and find the right balance between them, and then you can be successful, and then you will be successful.
Thank you so much, Christian. Definitely an episode I'm going to re-listen to a few more times. And thank you so much for the audience, for you guys for showing up, for making it to the end of the episode. Have an amazing day. See you again at the next episode of Productivity Mastery.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and it's been a pleasure, Stoyan. Thank you.